Hey, thanks for stopping by. If you're watching this video, you're either watching it on my YouTube channel or on the YouTube channel for the Appalachian Authors Guild. Sorry for the glare, but that's the best I can do right now. The reason for this short video, I was honored this week to actually be invited to conduct a workshop in Abingdon, Virginia, for the Appalachian Authors Guild. And the topic that we discussed was the anti-hero and how the anti-hero shapes our storytelling. Now, if you're a seasoned writer, you're well aware of what the anti-hero is and the purpose and story. If you're not, if you're a newer writer or you've never really explored in your work using the anti-hero and that concept, then this may be a very interesting, settle in, take some notes. And as I talk about these things for the next few minutes, I want you to consider how these things impact your writing, or what your story is that you're wanting to tell or wanting to write. So let me just kind of give you a brief definition. I have a PDF printout here that I made up and handed out to those in person. And if you're a guild member and you'd like a copy of this, you can ask Vicky, the chair. She has a copy. Or if you're connected through my Facebook or YouTube page, uh, request it and I'll send one to you. But what is an anti-hero? And this is a character in literature or I talked a lot about movies because movies and television because there are writers that have to write those scripts. So no matter what genre you're experiencing the anti-hero in, it was written first. So, this is a character in literature or movies that's missing the great wholesome qualities of a traditional hero. They lack in morality or values. They seldom play by the rules. They aren't the villains of the story because they give us plenty of reasons to actually cheer for them. They are complex characters with sketchy motivations. Keep that in mind, sketchy motivations. Most of the time, that's their MO. Although they sort of save the day, so to speak, their methods of getting to that point are sometimes outlandish and always questionable. And I listed out several different character traits. I may or may not get into many of these, but I wanted to, as you think about your story, who is a character in your story that is a good guy, but they're not such a good guy or gal? And some of those stories, I started thinking back and thinking about some of the most popular movies and books in our history, and come up with a list of some of the most popular anti-heroes. And so that list actually might shock you a little bit. But I wanted to sort of, before I preempt into that, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit historically about our culture and why the anti-hero is so important. When we think of heroes in literature, movies, television, we think of the wholesome good guy, the good cop that always catches the criminal. We think of the superhero like Superman, truth, justice, and the American way. But at some point, I think in our culture, with just the experiences that we've had, sometime after World War II, I think you had the GI Joe character, which was a wholesome character and truly a hero, and then you had other superheroes that came about in comics that were doing things for the right reasons, the right motivations, and you go to the bad guys because it's just the right thing to do. You got to protect the innocent. But at some point, I think society sort of was ready for like a hero that was not so wholesome, not so black and white, not so sharp in the in the camp of good, but somebody who's like the rest of us. We kind of live in that gray area. We try to do our best, but sometimes we do certain things and for the wrong motivation. Um, I'll give you a great example. One of my favorite anti-heroes in movies. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. So one of my favorite anti-heroes is actually Han Solo. And you're thinking, no, wait a minute, didn't he help Luke blow up the Death Star in Star Wars and rescue the princess and then helped out all the way through Return of the Jedi, and then of course he was the good guy in the latest movies. Yeah, yeah, he was. But let's go back and look at the original movie. Han Solo was a former stormtrooper. He was a smuggler, and he worked for shady characters like Jabba the Hutt, who, let's not forget, is like a mafia mob boss. So he worked for those kinds of people. He helped Luke rescue the princess because Luke promised him all kinds of money. And so that's why he was after Princess Leia to rescue her because, hey, he wanted the reward. He wasn't in it for the good. He was in it for himself. But he did the right thing. So he was a lovable character. He was a great character. But he just, in the beginning, he was very much an anti-hero. He did all the good things for the wrong reasons because he's a selfish son of a gun. Let's face it. So, do you have a character like that that's in one of your stories, or is this a character you want to develop? So, sit down and actually think about those character traits that you might want your anti-hero to have in your next work as you develop your character. Now, some of those traits, I'll just go ahead and read a couple of them. Morally ambivalent. Sometimes they do the right thing, only sometimes for the right reason. Selfish motivations. Yep, that's Han Solo. Arrogant and prideful. Check. Unscrupulous, maybe a bit violent. Conan the Barbarian, anyone? Who didn't love those comics and movies? But here we're talking about a guy that's going around lopping heads off. But he was our good guy, right? So um, somebody who rebels against authority. Yep, there's Han Solo. Self-destructive behaviors. Han Solo. Yeah, why are you dealing with people like Jabba the Hutt when you're gonna die if you mess up, troubled past that haunts them. Now, a lot of our characters may have a troubled past that haunts them, but that doesn't necessarily make them an anti-hero. But if you have that troubled past that's sort of carried into the present, and that's sort of who they are, that's when you can develop an anti-hero. So again, like Han Solo, for example. But here's some other really popular anti-heroes in movies and television. Tony Soprano. We all cheered for Tony Soprano. We loved that show as a culture. I mean, it was wildly popular. I loved the show. But the guy was like vulgar, violent. He was a mob boss. Had people whacked all the time. Even, had when his best friend, Pompanero, Big P, whacked. And he just the only thing was he was going to therapy and trying to work through things, and the other mob bosses were all still ruthless, and he was the one guy trying to do right by his family and his children, right? So we sort of empathized with certain aspects of this character, but other character traits and his job, we were still sort of cheering him on as he, went to I guess sometimes backdoor war against other mob bosses, and especially his uncle who was trying to have him killed because his uncle wanted to control the family. So that was a classic one. Let's stick in the same genre. Michael Corleone with The Godfather. Who didn't love The Godfather? But that was another great classic anti-hero. We're cheering on a mob boss, the guy who killed all the heads of the five families in part two. So, let's or was that part one? It was part one. So, yeah, it was just it's amazing some of the characters that we cheer on. Once we get empathetic about certain things in their lives. Another great one here, the most recent one, was Dexter Morgan. How many of you watched the show Dexter on Showtime? That was a great series. Dexter was, if you haven't seen it, Dexter is very much a troubled character. He works for the Miami Police Department, and he's got, I guess he has inside baseball on all these criminals, many of whom are guilty, but they somehow beat the justice system and they're out roaming free. Well, this is where vengeance comes into play. Dexter is a serial killer, and he has a code that he lives by. His father taught him. So the code is he only goes after bad people, like really bad people. So he'll go after other murderers or rapists and just horrible people that should be locked away in jail or have the death penalty by now. And Dexter goes out and kills them. That's how he gets his fix, because he has to kill somebody, but he can't go out and kill the innocent because of his code. So he only goes after these bad people who have escaped justice. And we cheer this. We're cheering for a serial killer. So again, anti-hero. I mean, this is the extreme cases. And that Breaking Bad show, Walter White. We're empathetic with a high school teacher who teaches chemistry or whatever, and he has cancer, and he's worried about his wife and his family, doesn't have the money to go through treatments, doesn't have the money to leave his family if he dies. So what does this guy do? Starts cooking meth, and he becomes a drug dealer, and a very ruthless one at that. So, um, but we're all empathetic to Walter White. Why? Because there are certain traits that we connect with people, I guess, on a wide scale. And in good storytelling, that you have an anti-hero of those extremes, you really build up the empathy. Those you focus on those parts that they have in common with the rest of us who are living our lives and struggling day to day with whatever is in our lives. Common things. So, and common themes. So keep that in mind as you develop a character, or if you go back and look at your own work to see how that character that you wrote about um, sort of comes to life as the anti-hero in your storytelling. Definitely think about it. Let's go to literature now. Let's go to books. Let's talk about the things that we write as writers. Let's go back. Actually, maybe the first American anti-hero was Huck Finn. And Mark Twain did a masterful job with this raucous boy who was, rough around the edges, very rough around the edges, and traveling down the Mississippi with Jim. And Jim is truly a hero in the story too. I can't stress that enough. But if you go back and you read those stories, they're great stories, great American storytelling. Probably one of the greatest storytellers in the history of this country. That's why I don't like the edited versions. Some people try to seem to get offended, and I can understand that with some of the language. But you have to keep in mind those times, and when that language was used, how Jim was such a hero that I don't know, he changed the landscape of the stories, and I think Twain did a masterful job in that. But most of us have read Huck Finn, but I think Huck Finn is probably one of maybe the first American anti-hero in literature. Let's take a look at Anne Rice, Lestat the Vampire. A lot of people love Anne Rice novels, but Lestat is a classic anti-hero. I mean, we are, kind of cheering for a vampire too, right? We're kind of empathetic with him. And let's go to another great American story and a movie that I know some people, even one of my sisters, could not get enough of growing up. Gone with the Wind. Who is more vain than Scarlett O'Hara? I mean, she is really not I wouldn't call her a great catch. I don't think she has those, personal attributes that make her a great catch. But a lot of people were very empathetic to Scarlett O'Hara, even despite all of her just egotistical flaws in that story. Holden Caulfield, if you look at The Catcher in the Rye, another great American novel. Holden Caulfield is like this. He curses a lot. He skips school, blames the world for his problems. Looks at women probably all the wrong way, and yet we're still sympathetic and empathetic toward his character as that book goes on. And if you've never read it, go read Catcher in the Rye. That's your homework for the week. But during that period of time, after war, that after World War, that book just captured a generation. Something in that lost generation saw something in Holden Caulfield that was them. And I think that book and that story, and I haven't researched this, and this may have been said a million times, but I think that probably was a very important piece to the Beat generation and the works that came out from the Beat writers of the 50s, which led to the counterculture writers of the 60s. So I think that all sort of fed into its own beast. But Holden Caulfield is one of the perfect examples of an anti-hero. My favorite literary anti-hero, Jay Gatsby. F. Scott Fitzgerald's Great Gatsby. You're so sympathetic and empathetic toward this guy because he is chasing something that he wants so desperately in his life, Daisy, which is not a good person. She's definitely not the same person she knew before. And the fact that Jay Gatsby is so wealthy now, it's because, again, he's all mobbed up. He's not a nice guy. He didn't come by his wealth and had this big mansion and throw these lavish parties to get everybody's attention. Actually, really just to get Daisy's attention, who lived across the way. And she would see all those parties. And of course, he invited her and her husband over. They got to experience the parties too. And just the lifestyle. And, she would come from money. But then in the end, when she rejected Gatsby, because she married a guy who had generational money, family, and Gatsby was first generation wealth from being illegal activities. So she said, "Silly, rich girls don't marry poor boys," and that's the way she still saw him, regardless of everything he did to change that impression and win that woman's love. And he even took the blame for a murder that she committed. She ran over her own husband's lover. All right. So if you haven't read The Great Gatsby, this is an amazing book. There's actually a really good movie that was made. Almost every movie made of this book sucks. But there's one that was made, I think it was in the late 70s, and it had Robert Redford in it and Mia Farrow. So go watch that version. It's on Paramount Plus. You can find it on there. And sometimes it's on Pluto on that app, on one of the I guess the movie channel there, like one of the movie classics channels. But it's a great movie, great story, and Jay Gatsby, I think, is one of the greatest anti-heroes in American literature, if not the best. So as you work on your books or your short stories or whatever you're working on, keep in mind that is your anti-hero getting the empathy of your readers? And what are they? How is your anti-hero connecting? Now I've kind of tinkered around with anti-heroes in my stories. Barry Dick from the Gonzo Chronicles, perfect example. He doesn't do things for the right reasons. He does them for his own. Rough around the edges, a little coarse, a little vulgar, and but it turns out to be comedy. And everything this guy falls into, any situation this guy falls into, he seems to land on his feet miraculously. Because I don't know, some people just have dumb luck, and people kind of cheer Barry on. And I guess some of the people who've read the books that I've talked to really like the character, and the comedic angle I put in to make light of all his problems and his faults, which I think a lot of us try to do in our own lives. Make light of our faults and our flaws, and that's okay. That's okay. So that was my talk about the anti-hero and how I wanted you to focus on how it fits in with what books you like to read, what movies you like to watch, and if you're a writer and the works that you're working on now or in the past. So if you have some comments on that, and you're watching on YouTube, leave some comments below. How's the anti-hero impacted your work and your storytelling? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. And we'll be back with some more videos hopefully soon. Take care.